Do not look at her. I had read every plate in the Ashby collection 3 times before I ever learned the woman's name. The illustrations arrived at Crest Hollow in March of 1847, tucked inside a leather portfolio sent from a solicitor's office in Bath. 47 hand-painted plates of botanical specimens, moss edges, a sequence of wild orchids rendered with such anatomical precision that my own naturalist, Dr. Pell, held the first plate to the lamp and said quietly, "I have not seen better." There were field notes too, dense with observation, the handwriting tight and disciplined. The cover letter identified the author as one Edward Ashby, natural philosopher, lately deceased, whose niece had submitted the work on behalf of his estate and wished to know whether the Duke of Crest Hollow, as patron of the Wetherton Society for Natural History, might consider sponsoring its publication. I said yes by return post. Before I had read to the 3rd page of the notes, the work was extraordinary, and I had waited 2 years for something worth funding. I sent a draft for £100 and thought nothing more of it except to wonder, idly, whether old Ashby had left any unpublished material behind. He had, rather a great deal of it. The correspondence that followed over the next 8 months was the most intellectually alive I had conducted in years. Miss Nora Ashby, acting as her uncle's literary executor, sent additional folios, geological cross-sections, a comparative study of Devonian fern fossils, a set of moth plates so detailed I had them framed. Her letters, though written in the 3rd person on behalf of the estate, my uncle's notes suggest, the late Mr. Ashby believed, were precise and quick. When I raised a challenge about the classification of a fossil specimen, she answered it in 4 sentences that demolished my objection entirely, and then apologized with admirable restraint for the disagreement. I found myself looking forward to the post in a way I had not since I was a young man at Oxford. I did not go to Bath. I had no reason to. She was an executor, a niece, a practical woman managing a dead man's affairs. The work was the thing. The work was what mattered. I told myself that every morning for 8 months. It was Dr. Pell who changed it. He came to me one afternoon in November with a letter from the Bath solicitor's office, a formal request. Miss Ashby had located a final portfolio, her uncle's most ambitious project, a complete natural history of the Mendip limestone country, 112 plates, 3 years of fieldwork. The solicitor's letter explained that due to the volume of material and the delicacy of the final corrections, Miss Ashby wondered whether she might bring the portfolio to Crest Hollow in person, to work alongside Dr. Pell in reviewing the proofs before they went to the printer. She asks very little, Dr. Pell said. A week, a corner of the library and access to the reference shelves. Of course, I said, and went back to my correspondence. She arrived on a Wednesday in a plain grey travelling coat, with 2 trunks of folio cases and a satchel that clinked with specimen jars. I was informed of her arrival by my housekeeper, who mentioned it the way one mentions the delivery of a writing desk. I intended to greet her at dinner and spend perhaps 20 minutes in civil exchange. I did not intend to be in the library at 5:30 the following morning. I was there because I could not sleep. I had been running figures for a drainage project on the East Fields, and the numbers were wrong, and I had gone to the library at dawn to find an old survey map. I opened the door quietly, expecting an empty room. She was at a long table by the east window, where the early light came in cold and pale. She had not heard me. She was bent over a proof sheet, dark hair pinned back loosely, a smudge of burnt sienna on her left wrist. She held a fine brush in one hand and was correcting a botanical plate, not transcribing, not filling in, but drawing. The brush moved with complete certainty. 1 straws, 2 more. She lifted her head to check the specimen jar on the table beside her, a pressed fern frond pinned to a board, and then returned to the plate and continued. I stood in the doorway for perhaps a full minute. She was not correcting her uncle's work. She was completing it. The brushwork was identical to every plate I had received over 8 months. The hand was the same. The certainty was the same. This was not a niece preserving a dead man's legacy. This was the author. I must have moved because she turned. She saw me and went still. For a moment she said nothing, and I watched the calculation move across her face. How much I had seen, what I understood, whether there was any version of this that held. "Your Grace," she said, "I apologize for the hour. Dr. Pell gave me leave to use the library at any time." "How long?" I said. She set the brush down. "I beg your pardon?" "How long has the work been yours, not your uncle's?" She was quiet for a moment, not frightened. She was not the kind of woman who frightened easily. I had known that from her letters, but measuring. "Since the beginning," she said. "My uncle was a gifted collector. He had a fine eye for specimens and excellent instincts in the field. He could not draw. He had no gift for the written description either, though he would not have said so. I did both. We worked together for 11 years. When he died, the work was half published under his name, and I had no standing to correct that." "You could have told me." "I could have," she said, and the evenness in her voice was remarkable. "And you would have written a very kind letter declining the commission. You would have been sorry to do it, I think, but you would have done it." I thought about denying it. I did not. "The Wetherton Society," she said, "does not accept work submitted by women. I believe you sit on its governing council, Your Grace." There it was. She did not say it with bitterness, only with a plainness that I found, in that moment, worse than bitterness. She was right. The rule was a formality no one had questioned, because no one with work of this quality had ever arrived to make them question it. "Miss Ashby," I said, "will you show me the remainder of the Mendip portfolio?" She looked at me carefully. "It is not finished." "Then show me what is finished." She watched me a moment longer, then pulled the nearest folio case toward her and opened it. She talked while she turned the pages, not performing, not explaining, just thinking aloud the way she must have done in the field with no one listening, about the sequence of limestone formations, about the particular fern colony in a north-facing gorge that she had visited 4 times in different seasons to get the light right, about the way the fossil record in the upper strata contradicted the accepted chronology by at least 30,000 years, and she had the core samples in the second trunk to prove it. I asked questions. She answered them without softening them for me, without checking whether I was following, and every time I kept pace she seemed slightly surprised, and then not surprised at all, and then simply present, talking to another person who thought as quickly as she did. We were still at the table when Mrs. Gale brought the breakfast tray at 8 o'clock. She set it down without comment and withdrew. Neither of us moved. By the end of the week I had read every page of the Mendip manuscript. By the end of the week I had also written 3 letters, one to the Wetherton Society's governing council proposing an amendment to the membership rules, citing the Ashby natural history as evidence that the restriction was both unjust and damaging to the Society's scientific reputation, one to the printer, instructing that the title page of the complete natural history be named Nora Ashby, natural philosopher, in full, and one to my solicitor. That 3rd letter was harder to write. I wrote 4 drafts. I was not in the habit of uncertainty, but I had spent 5 days watching a woman of extraordinary precision and extraordinary restraint move through a world that had given her every reason to become smaller, and she had simply refused to. She had done the work. She had sent it out under another name because that was the only door that opened, and she had never, in 8 months of correspondence, asked me to see past the arrangement. She had trusted the work to speak, and the work had. I did not think I deserved to say what I wanted to say. I said it anyway. She was in the courtyard on Friday morning, supervising the loading of her trunks into the carriage. When I came down, she had her travelling coat on again. She was efficient and composed, and she would have been gone within the quarter hour. "Miss Ashby." She turned. "The title page," I said. "I have instructed the printer, your name, in full. I should like your approval of the wording before it goes to press." She was quiet for a moment. Something crossed her face that she did not quite control, not triumph, not relief exactly, but something steadier and older than both. "Thank you, Your Grace. And the council has agreed to review the membership rule. You will receive a formal letter. I expect the amendment will pass." I see. She looked at me with a directness that I had come to understand was simply how she looked at everything she was trying to understand. And the third letter you wrote on Wednesday evening. I had not known she had seen that. My solicitor, I said. A private matter. Regarding? Regarding whether a man who spent 8 months corresponding with the finest natural philosopher he has ever read, without troubling himself to visit Bath, might present himself as something other than a fool, and whether she would consent to walk with him through the East Fields this afternoon. I am told the drainage ditch is an eyesore. I believe she might have a better solution than my surveyor. She looked at me for a long moment. Then, carefully, she set her satchel down. The tile drainage system used at the Ashby farm in 1841 reduced standing water by 40%, she said. I designed it. I had hoped, I said, that you might be willing to stay a little longer. She stayed, and the fields drained, and the title page bore her name, as it should always have done, and the world of natural philosophy was the richer for it. But what I remember most in all the years since is that morning light in the library, and the complete certainty of her hand, and the way she did not ask anyone's permission to be exactly what she was. I was the most fortunate man in England. I simply had not known it until the post arrived from Bath,